The night my life changed forever began like a dream. The yacht rocked gently on the glittering black waters, its polished deck gleaming under the pale wash of moonlight. Music spilled from hidden speakers, soft jazz that mixed with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. I stood at the bow, looking out at the endless sea, thinking, this is peace. This is everything I worked for. But what I didn't know was that within a few hours, I would be fighting for my life against the one person I thought I could always trust, my own brother. My name is Adrian Blackwell, and at 34 years old, I was living what most people would call the dream. From the outside, I was the definition of success, a self-made billionaire, respected in business circles, envied in social ones. People whispered about my empire, my sharp deals, my relentless discipline. They thought I had it all. What they didn't see was the cost. The sleepless nights, the ruthless negotiations, the sacrifices of relationships, and the constant paranoia that came with holding so much wealth. Money was power, yes, but it was also a curse. I knew that. What I didn't know was that my curse would come in the form of Damien, my younger brother. Damien and I couldn't have been more different. Where I was cautious, he was reckless. Where I was calculating, he was impulsive. He had charm, nod, did he have charm? People gravitated toward him like moths to a flame. He could walk into any room and leave with everyone's phone number, a pocket full of promises, and admiration dripping from every glance. But behind that smile was something sharper, something hungrier. Envy. He never said it out loud, not directly, but I could see it in the way he looked at me when the subject of money came up. When I made my first 100 million, he slapped me on the back and joked, "Guess I'll just have to marry rich." When I crossed into the Billionaires Club, he sent me a congratulatory text, "Don't forget us little people." A laughing emoji at the end. But it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like a warning. Growing up, my parents adored him. Damien was the baby of the family, the one they shielded from consequences. If he broke a vase, I was scolded for not watching him. If he failed a class, they hired tutors. If he crashed his first car, they bought him another. I learned discipline. He learned indulgence. Maybe that's why he never respected what I built, because he never understood the price of it. For years, I tried to ignore the tension between us. Tried to believe his sarcasm was harmless, that his occasional jabs were nothing but brotherly banter. But then things started happening, subtle things that gnawed at the edges of my empire. Deals I hadn't announced mysteriously collapsed. Competitors somehow got access to confidential numbers. Journalists printed rumors that mirrored conversations I had only at home. At first, I blamed rivals. But deep down, a suspicion began to grow. Could it have been Damien? No. He was my brother. Blood. Family. He wouldn't. Would he? I buried the thought. Because the alternative, that the man who toasted me at Christmas dinners, who hugged me after board meetings, who called me Big Brother with a smile, was secretly sabotaging me, was too dark to accept. And then came the invitation. "Come celebrate with me," Damien said one afternoon, his voice smooth over the phone. "The yacht's ready. Just family. You've been buried in work too long, Adrian. You need to relax." I hesitated. Something in his tone prickled at me, but I brushed it off. Maybe he was right. Maybe I did need a break. So, against my instincts, I agreed. That's how I found myself on his deck that night, surrounded by music, champagne, and what looked like genuine happiness. My parents were there, glowing with pride. A few trusted business partners laughed at Damien's stories. He played the perfect host, pouring drinks, slapping shoulders, and praising me like he'd never done before. "To my brother Adrian," he said loudly, raising his glass, "the genius who made us all proud. The man who turned dust into gold." The crowd cheered, clapping me on the back. I smiled, but inside, something twisted. The way Damien looked at me while he said those words. It wasn't pride. It was hunger. As the night wore on, the crowd thinned. Conversations faded. The stars shone brighter, mirrored by the ocean's glassy surface. That's when Damien stepped close, draping an arm around my shoulders. "Come on," he whispered. "Let's talk, just the two of us." We walked out to the deck. The night air was cool, the horizon endless. The sea was calm, but my chest felt tight. Damien leaned against the railing, staring at the moonlit water. "You ever wonder," he said suddenly, his voice low, "what it would be like if things were reversed? If I had what you had?" I laughed awkwardly. "You'd blow it all in a week." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. In the moonlight, they looked sharp, almost cold. "Maybe," he murmured. "Or maybe I'd prove everyone wrong." A chill ran through me. I wanted to brush it off, to laugh again, to remind myself this was just Damien being dramatic. But deep down, something inside me stirred, a warning I'd ignored too many times before. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the first crack in the facade. The first glimpse of the storm he'd been building in silence. Because Damien wasn't just dreaming of taking my place. He was planning it. And soon, very soon, he would act. The next morning, the sun spilled across the deck of the yacht, painting everything gold. Seagulls wheeled above, their cries cutting through the salty air. The party had ended only hours before, yet the scent of champagne and perfume lingered like ghosts. I woke with a dull ache in my chest. Something about Damien's words from the night before wouldn't leave me. What if things were reversed? It wasn't just a thoughtless remark. It was a glimpse of something darker, something I had been refusing to see. But the strangest thing was this: while I had drifted off to bed in my private cabin around 2 in the morning, I distinctly remembered hearing voices outside on the deck. Hushed, urgent, almost conspiratorial. And Damien's laughter, low, sharp, like the edge of a blade. I told myself it was nothing. Just my mind exaggerating after too much champagne. But deep down, the unease refused to fade. Damien was waiting for me at breakfast, sitting at the long oak table with a plate of untouched food. He looked fresh, energetic, as though he hadn't slept at all. "Morning, big brother," he said, flashing his trademark smile. "Morning," I replied, sliding into a chair. He leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. "You know, you should let me handle some of your deals. Spread the work around a little. You look exhausted." I arched a brow. "Handle my deals? Why not?" His tone was playful, but his eyes glittered with something else. "I know enough. And besides, you can't run the empire forever. Sooner or later, you'll have to pass it on. Better to keep it in the family, right?" There it was again, that word. Pass it on. I gave a short laugh. "Damien, you can barely manage your own accounts without running them dry. I don't think Wall Street is ready for your style." His smile faltered, just for a second, before snapping back into place. "Maybe you underestimate me." Later that day, while others were sunbathing and drinking on the deck, I retreated to my cabin to check emails. Business never really slept, not even at sea. As I sifted through reports, one caught my eye: an internal leak investigation. Confidential memos had been forwarded to outside competitors. Millions were at risk. The troubling part: the digital trail led back to a device that had connected from my own home address. The only person with access, aside from me, was Damien. I felt the blood drain from my face. Coincidence? Maybe. But too many coincidences had piled up over the last few months. And each time, I had brushed them aside, convincing myself it couldn't be him. Now, staring at that report, the denial cracked. It is him. That night, I confronted him, carefully. The music was softer this time, the crowd smaller. We stood on the outer deck again, the ocean stretching endlessly around us. "Damien," I began, trying to keep my voice calm, "I need to ask you something. Have you been interfering in my business deals?" His head snapped toward me, eyes wide with feigned innocence. "What? Of course not. Why would I?" "Because," I said slowly, "every time something slips, every time someone knows what they shouldn't, your name is never far away." For a moment, silence. Then he laughed, a sound that sent a chill through me. "You think I'm your enemy, Adrian? After everything. I'm your brother." He placed a hand on my shoulder, squeezing just a bit too tightly. "I'd never betray you." But his grip lingered, and his smile was too sharp. The next evening, he invited a handful of friends aboard, men I had never met, men who didn't fit with the usual polished crowd. They wore expensive suits, yes, but their manner was different. Heartened. Watchful. They spoke in hushed tones, drank without toasting, and eyed me with something that felt closer to assessment than admiration. When Damien introduced them, he was vague. "Business partners," he said. "Potential investors." But I knew investors. These men weren't investors. They were wolves. Later, I overheard snippets of conversation as I passed by the lounge. "He won't see it coming. We'll make the transfer look clean. By the time he realizes, it'll be too late." My blood ran cold. They fell silent when they noticed me, masks slipping back into polite smiles. Damien clapped me on the back, too loudly. "Adrian. Just talking about some opportunities. You'll hear all about it soon." But I already knew. He wasn't talking about opportunities. He was talking about me. Sleep became impossible after that. Every creak of the yacht, every footstep outside my door, made my pulse race. I began locking my cabin at night, a habit I hadn't needed since my early days in business. Even then, I wasn't sure it was enough. I thought of telling my parents, of warning them. But what could I say? That their golden child, their charming youngest son, was plotting against me? They would never believe it. They'd accuse me of paranoia, of overwork, of letting success make me cynical. And maybe they'd be right. Maybe I was paranoid. But deep down, my instincts screamed otherwise. The storm broke on the fourth night. The party was louder this time, the air heavy with expensive liquor and false laughter. I had stepped away from the crowd, heading below deck, when I caught sight of Damien slipping into the control room with two of his investors. Curiosity, and dread, pushed me to follow silently. Through the crack of the door, I saw Damien hunched over a set of documents, his voice low but urgent. "All of it will transfer automatically. Offshore. Untouchable. The signatures are ready. By dawn, Adrian won't even know what hit him." My chest tightened. Transfer. Offshore. Signatures. He was planning to drain me. Not just a portion. Everything. My fortune. My legacy. My life's work. And he would do it while I was still here, smiling in his face, toasting with his guests, blind to the knife aimed at my back. I stumbled away from the door, heart hammering. The weight of betrayal pressed down on me like lead. My brother, the one person I had trusted above all others, was orchestrating my downfall, right under my nose. But as I stood there in the shadows of the yacht, another realization struck me, one that turned my fear into cold resolve. If Damien wanted a war for everything I had built, then he would get one. And this time, I wouldn't underestimate him. Not ever again. The night air on the yacht had shifted. Gone was the easy laughter, the playful clinking of champagne glasses. In its place lingered something heavier, charged, like the silence before thunder splits the sky. I could no longer pretend. Damien's betrayal wasn't speculation. I had heard him with my own ears. I had seen the papers spread across the control room table, illuminated by the glow of a single lamp. Offshore accounts. Transfer orders. My signature forged. For a few hours, I stayed locked in my cabin, pacing like a caged animal. Rage boiled inside me, but so did caution. If I confronted him too soon, without proof, he'd twist it into paranoia. He was always the charming one. He could convince anyone of anything. But fate didn't give me the luxury of waiting. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. I was walking toward the upper deck when I caught Damien standing at the railing, staring out at the dark ocean. His back was straight, shoulders squared, as if he were rehearsing some victory speech. "You should be asleep," I said, my voice sharp against the hush of the waves. He didn't turn around. "And miss the view?" "I don't think so." I stepped closer. "The view, or the sound of your fortune being transferred into accounts that don't belong to you?" That got his attention. His head whipped around, eyes narrowing. The mask slipped, just for an instant, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "You were listening." His voice was flat, stripped of its usual charm. "Yes." My fists clenched. "I heard everything. You're plotting to rob me blind, Damien. Your own brother." A pause. Then, slowly, he smiled. Not the warm, boyish grin our parents loved. No, this was sharper, crueler. Finally, he whispered. "You see me for who I really am." For a moment, the only sound was the wind tugging at the yacht's flags. "Why?" I demanded. My voice cracked with anger, but beneath it was something closer to heartbreak. "You had everything. Our family's trust. My trust. And you choose betrayal?" "Everything?" He laughed, bitter and low. "No, Adrian. You had everything. The company. The respect. The legacy. Me? I was the afterthought. The shadow. The one no one trusted with more than scraps." I shook my head. "That's not true." "It is." His voice rose, echoing across the empty deck. "You were groomed to lead. I was left to watch. Do you have any idea what it's like, being compared to you at every turn? To know that no matter what I did, I'd never measure up? I was always second. Always less." I stared at him, my chest tight. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I had never thought of him that way. But the fire in his eyes told me it wouldn't matter. This wasn't just greed. It was years of resentment, festering into something poisonous. "You're my brother," I said quietly. "And yet you destroy me." He stepped closer, lowering his voice until it was almost intimate. "Not destroy, Adrian. Replace. This empire doesn't belong to you alone. It should have been mine, too. I'm just taking what should have been mine all along." Something in me snapped then. The fear, the hesitation, it all burned away, leaving only steel. "You'll never take it," I said. "Not while I'm still standing." His smile widened. "Then maybe you won't be standing much longer." At that moment, the door to the lounge swung open, and half a dozen of Damien's so-called investors stepped out, their heavy footsteps thudding against the deck. They flanked him like bodyguards, eyes fixed on me. The trap had sprung. One of them muttered, "Is it time?" Damien's gaze never left mine. "Not yet. I want my brother to understand." My pulse thundered in my ears. I was alone, outnumbered, with nothing but the ocean at my back. But I refused to back down. "You think you can strong-arm me?" I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing inside. "Everything I built, every deal, every alliance, I earned. You? You're nothing but a parasite. Without me, you wouldn't last a week." The insult landed. His jaw tightened. For a second, I thought he might strike me himself. Instead, he leaned in close, his whisper venomous. "Enjoy your pride, brother. Tomorrow morning, when the transfer clears, pride is all you'll have left." He turned to leave, but I caught his arm. No. Tomorrow morning, you'll be the one exposed. He froze. Slowly, he turned back. What did you say? I allowed myself a thin smile. Did you really think I wouldn't notice your little scheme? That I wouldn't prepare for it? Every document you touched, every forged signature, it's all been traced. I made sure of it. By the time dawn comes, the authorities will know everything. It was a bluff. At least, for now. But I delivered it with such conviction that even Damien faltered. His eyes flickered, uncertain. For the first time, the cracks in his confidence showed. The men behind him shifted, restless. One of them asked, "Is this true?" Damien snapped at him. "Shut up. He's lying." But the seed of doubt had been planted. I pressed harder. Think about it. You really believe I'd invite you onto this yacht without safeguards? I knew you were plotting, Damien. I just didn't think you'd stoop this low. Damien's face darkened, rage boiling to the surface. You always think you're 10 steps ahead. Always playing the untouchable mastermind. But not this time. He motioned to his men. Get him. Before they could move, thunder cracked across the sky. A sudden squall rolled in, the wind howling, the yacht lurching violently beneath our feet. Glass shattered somewhere behind us as the sea churned. The storm had arrived. The investors stumbled, grabbing for the railing. I seized the moment, shoving Damien back. He staggered, nearly losing his balance. His eyes blazed with fury. You'll regret that, he shouted over the roar of the wind. But I didn't wait. I bolted toward the control room, the storm shielding my escape. Behind me, I could hear Damien's furious orders and the pounding of footsteps in pursuit. The battle lines had been drawn. And on that storm-tossed yacht, brother against brother, the war for everything we had ever been was about to begin. Rain slammed down in sheets, stinging my face as I fought my way across the slick deck. The yacht heaved violently, its bow plunging into a black wall of waves. Lightning tore the sky apart, illuminating the chaos in brutal flashes, men struggling for balance, chairs and glasses skidding across the floor, ropes snapping like whips. Behind me, Damien's voice cut through the storm. Don't let him get away. His men surged forward, their shadows jagged against the floodlights. My heart hammered, every instinct screaming at me to keep moving. If they cornered me here, in the open, I wouldn't stand a chance. I darted toward the control room, the storm howling around me like a living beast. My shoes skidded against the drenched deck, but I forced myself to stay upright. One wrong move and the sea would claim me. The door to the control room slammed shut behind me. I twisted the lock, chest heaving. For a moment, I pressed my forehead to the cold glass, forcing myself to think. Damien thought he held all the cards. But storms could turn even the most carefully planned game upside down. I needed to flip the board. My eyes swept across the room, searching. Charts. Radios. The master console flickered under the strain of the weather. And there, mounted near the wheel, was the yacht's emergency transmitter. A beacon strong enough to cut through any storm. If I could activate it, I could send out a distress signal. Authorities would come. Witnesses would come. And Damien's empire of lies would crumble. I lunged for the transmitter, fingers trembling as I flipped the cover. But before I could press the switch, a deafening bang shook the door behind me. They were trying to break in. The first crack splintered the wood. My time was vanishing. I slammed my hand onto the beacon switch. A piercing alarm blared, red lights flashing across the panel. Somewhere above, the yacht's antenna sent its desperate cry into the night. I allowed myself a breath of relief. The signal was out. Help was on its way. Then the door burst open. Damien's men spilled into the room, their faces twisted with fury. At their center stood Damien himself, rain dripping from his hair, eyes burning with rage. You think that little stunt will save you? He snarled. It already has, I shot back. They're coming. And when they do, you'll be finished. He lunged, striking the console with the butt of a wrench. Sparks flew. The beacon's alarm sputtered and died. Not if they can't find us, he said through gritted teeth. Two of his men seized me by the arms, forcing me to my knees. Pain jolted through my shoulders as they wrenched them back. Damien crouched in front of me, his face inches from mine. You never learn, Adrian, he hissed. Always relying on rules, on systems. You think the world cares about right and wrong? No. The world belongs to those bold enough to take it. I met his gaze, my jaw tight. Then take it. But know this, storms don't care about thieves. They'll drag us all under. For a second, lightning illuminated his face, sharp and cruel. Then he stood, turning to his men. Lock him in the engine room. If the storm doesn't kill him, I will. They dragged me through the corridors, the yacht rocking so hard the walls seemed to shift around us. Water poured down the stairs as waves crashed against the hull. Somewhere deep below, the engine roared and sputtered, straining against the sea's fury. When the door slammed behind me, I stumbled into darkness. The air was hot, metallic, thick with oil fumes. My wrists ached where their grip had bruised me. For a moment, despair threatened to consume me. The storm above. Damien's betrayal. The walls closing in. It felt like the end. But then I remembered something. The beacon wasn't the only system wired into the yacht. If I could reach the engine controls, I could force Damien's hand. I groped through the shadows until my fingers found the control panel. The storm made the yacht's movements erratic, but I steadied myself, flipping open the casing. Sparks danced, illuminating the small space in bursts of orange. I hesitated only once. What I was about to do could doom us all. But if I didn't act, Damien would win, and everything my family built would die with me. I pulled the lever. The engine screamed, gears grinding. Then, with a violent shudder, the yacht lurched to the side. Sirens wailed as systems overloaded. The lights flickered, then plunged into near darkness. Above, I heard the chaos, men shouting, furniture crashing, Damien roaring in rage. The storm was no longer his ally. It was mine. The door burst open again, this time not with guards, but with a surge of seawater flooding the floor. I staggered against the wall, choking on the spray. I had crippled the yacht, maybe too well. Clambering onto a ladder, I hauled myself up toward the main deck. Every muscle burned, but adrenaline drove me. If I stayed below, I'd drown. When I emerged, the sight stole my breath. The storm was apocalyptic. Waves towered higher than the yacht's deck, smashing against the hull with bone-shaking force. The mast groaned, one of its sails torn to shreds. Lightning split the sky, revealing Damien at the helm, fighting to control the wheel. His men were scattered, clinging to whatever they could. And there, amid the chaos, our eyes locked again. You did this. He screamed across the storm. I staggered forward, rain blinding me. No, Damien. You did. Your greed. Your lies. This storm is the truth you can't escape. He abandoned the wheel, stumbling toward me. The yacht veered, almost capsizing. But neither of us cared anymore. Brother against brother. The storm roared around us, demanding its price. And as Damien lunged, I braced myself. This was no longer about money, or power, or legacy. This was survival. The deck pitched beneath my feet, slick with rain and seawater. The yacht groaned like a dying beast as wave after wave smashed against its sides. Above, lightning clawed across the sky, tearing open the darkness for split seconds at a time. And there he was. Damien, drenched and furious, his hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes burning with the same fire that had driven him since childhood. In that storm-lit instant, he looked less like a man and more like a force of nature itself, unstoppable, destructive, inevitable. "Adrian," he roared over the thunder, stumbling toward me across the tilting deck. "You ruined everything." "No," I shouted back, bracing against the rail as the yacht lurched. "You did this yourself. You let greed consume you. You betrayed Father's legacy." Father's legacy was a lie. His laugh was broken, ragged, almost hysterical. "He chose you. Always you. The obedient son, the golden heir. And what did I get? Scraps. Shadows. I swore I'd take what was mine, even if I had to rip it from your hands." His words struck harder than the storm. For the first time, beneath all his rage, I saw the raw wound he carried, jealousy sharpened into obsession. But there was no space left for pity. He lunged. His fist crashed against my jaw, sending me sprawling onto the slick deck. Pain exploded through my skull, the salty tang of blood flooding my mouth. I barely had time to roll aside before his boot slammed down where my head had been. The storm howled as if it, too, demanded blood. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing hold of a broken length of railing torn loose by the waves. Damien sneered when he saw it. "Always fighting with scraps. Just like Father's dog." He swung a wrench, the metal glinting in the lightning. Sparks flew as it clashed against my makeshift weapon. The impact jolted through my bones. We struggled, metal grinding against metal, both of us slipping dangerously close to the edge. Another wave struck, lifting the yacht almost sideways. We tumbled, crashing against the railing. My weapon skittered away into the sea. Damien pinned me, his wrench pressing against my throat. "This ends now," he hissed. "The empire is mine." Choking, I clawed at his arm, the world blurring at the edges. But then the yacht lurched again, and both of us were hurled against the mast. The wrench slipped from his hand, clattering across the deck. I gasped for air, shoving him off with a desperate burst of strength. My vision swam, but rage and survival drove me forward. We collided again, fists and elbows, brothers locked in a primal, brutal war. Every blow carried years of resentment, every strike an unspoken truth. Finally, I landed a punch that sent Damien sprawling against the wheel. Blood trickled from his lip, his chest heaving. He laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "You think beating me will save you?" He spat. "Even if we survive this storm, the world already believes me. I control the board. You're nothing but a pawn." I shook my head, steadying myself against the mast. "No, Damien. You forgot one thing." His eyes narrowed. "What?" I pointed to the mast above us. "The storm is still playing." As if on cue, lightning split the sky, striking the mast with a deafening crack. Sparks erupted, showering the deck in fire and smoke. The yacht shuddered violently, alarms screaming. Damien staggered, eyes wide with disbelief. For the first time, fear flickered across his face. The mast groaned, tilting as its support snapped. In a horrifying instant, it crashed down across the deck, smashing through the wheel and tearing the rail apart. Damien was thrown against the edge, barely catching hold of a twisted piece of steel. His body dangled above the raging sea. I froze, my chest heaving, every instinct torn in two. He looked up at me, rain streaming down his face, eyes burning with something between hatred and desperate hope. "Adrian," he shouted, his voice raw. "Pull me up. We're brothers." My hands trembled as I stepped closer, the storm screaming around us. Part of me saw the boy he once was, the brother who had laughed with me, dreamed with me, chased the same horizon. But standing here now, I also saw the man he had become, ruthless, treacherous, willing to sacrifice anyone for power. If I saved him, he would try again. If I let go, the storm would claim him, ending it all. His grip was slipping. His eyes locked on mine, filled with defiance even now. Do it. He dared me. Be the hero, Adrian. Or prove you're just like me. The weight of everything crashed down on me, father's trust, mother's tears, the empire built on our family's name. I reached out. For a heartbeat, hope lit his face. But then another wave slammed against the yacht, tearing the steel from his grip. His scream was swallowed by the storm as he plunged into the black abyss below. I staggered back, collapsing against the broken mast, my chest heaving with exhaustion and grief. The sea swallowed Damien whole, leaving nothing but foam and shadow. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. My brother, my rival, my betrayer, was gone. The storm raged on, but slowly, painfully, I pulled myself upright. The yacht was sinking, its hull broken, alarms wailing into the night. Then, through the rain, I saw them, searchlights sweeping across the waves. A rescue vessel, drawn by the distress call I had managed to send before Damien smashed the console. They were coming. I raised my arm, signaling with the last strength I had. Hours later, I stood on the deck of the rescue ship, wrapped in a blanket, watching as the remains of our family yacht disappeared beneath the waves. The storm had passed, leaving only silence, and the memory of everything it had taken. I thought of Damien. Of what he had chosen. Of what he had lost. And I thought of father, of the legacy he entrusted me with. This empire would not be built on greed. It would not be twisted by envy. It would stand, stronger than before, reborn in truth. I whispered into the night, a vow carried by the wind. I will protect it. For all of us. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, I felt something I thought I had lost forever. Hope. Weeks had passed since that night on the yacht, yet the sound of the storm still echoed in my dreams. Sometimes, I woke up with the taste of salt on my lips, as if the sea itself refused to let me forget. Damien's face haunted me most of all. His rage. His desperation. And in those final seconds, the flicker of hope when he thought I would pull him back. I still wondered if I should have done more, if saving him could have changed the ending. But deep down, I knew the truth. Damien had chosen his path long before that storm. And the sea had simply delivered its final judgment. The world, however, did not know the details. Newspapers called it a tragic accident. A storm at sea. A legacy nearly destroyed. Few knew of the battle that had raged not just on the yacht, but within our family. Standing now in the boardroom, overlooking the skyline our father once dreamed of, I felt the weight of both loss and responsibility. This empire was mine to protect, but it would not be forged in greed or envy. It would be built on resilience, on the truth our family nearly lost. Sometimes, when the wind howled through the city towers, I swore I could still hear Damien's voice, mocking, daring, reminding me of the thin line between ambition and destruction. And that reminder would follow me forever. But as dawn touched the glass windows, I knew one thing for certain: the storm had ended, and I was still standing. The legacy lived on.